So my name's Fred Robbins. I bought this Spitfire 1300 Mark IV in June 1974. It was then 2 years old, had about 20,000 miles on the clock, and I drove it until August 2016, i.e. 42 years, when I pass it on to my nephew here in Yeovil.
We're now in the car with the previous owner, Fred, it's the first time you've taken it out for about a year or so, isn't it?
Well, about 3 years.
Yeah, 3 years, yeah. So he's obviously enjoying it. We're going to have a chat about the history of the vehicle and what maintenance and what bits he worked on. You had the car for
42 years.
42 years, yes. So, yeah, a long time to own a car, especially in these day and ages when everyone's buying new cars every 3 years. But yeah, I'll hand over to him.
From the get-go, my main concern was just preventing rust, because cars of that era were very, very prone to rust. The sills, bottom of the doors, top of the wheel arches, edge of the boot, they'd rust after 3-4 years. So from the word go, I was very keen to spray in all sorts of gunge before finally settling on a Swedish product, Supertrol, which came in aerosols, a nice fine dispensing tube, which produced a beautiful fine mist of anti-rust fluid, which has worked a treat.
Yes, it's been good ever since.
Absolutely.
Yes, yeah.
I didn't realise that the front quarter panels were actually a double skin panels section, so I didn't spray in my anti-rust fluid into them, and so of course inevitably after about 7 years rust appeared, so I replaced them with fiberglass, which probably wasn't the best thing to do. I should have gone for the real steel items, but I wasn't so concerned with authenticity in those days. I had the brake lines, the old steel galvanized brake lines, replaced with copper, again to prevent any sort of potential damage by rust, and the rest has just been straightforward maintenance and mechanical parts over the 42 years as was necessary.
So was it a daily driver as such, or did you just...
Yes, for my first 20 years of use I used it as my daily commuting car.
Yeah.
I lived in South East London, a place called Mottingham, Eltham, a place called Pettswood, and I worked in North London, so I daily drove through the tunnels under the Thames in the morning rush hour traffic. So most of my nearly 100,000 miles was put on during my first 2 decades of ownership. As the decades went on, I bought other cars to use as my main cars, and the Spitfire was used progressively less and less and less. Probably in my last sort of 10-15 years of ownership, I was sort of down to maybe only 250 miles between MOT certificates.
Yes, yeah.
So it's hardly being used. It's not a car liked by real sports car enthusiasts, because it's got a slightly nasty habit at the back end, which is if you corner very, very sharply, the rear wheel on the inside of the bend can suddenly tuck in, so you lose almost half your adhesion, so the back end will just fly out and it's almost impossible to control. So for that, in fact, very good reason, they've never been raced really, and sports car enthusiasts like the old MGBs, MG Midgets, Sprites,
more geared towards the
yeah, because their solid back axles are predictable and they slide in a controllable way. This one will slide so far, they'd zip you're gone. This car has an overdrive, which effectively is 6 forward gears. In third gear, you can use it as a real acceleration boost. Get near sort of peak revs in third gear, hit the overdrive button on the gear lever, and the car would almost instantly go into a gear which is almost the same as top gear. Or alternatively, if you go into overdrive in normal fourth gear, you've got a high geared cruising gear. So it's really similar to a modern day 5-speed gearbox. But for whatever reason, in the old days, gearbox were always 4-speed. It's a nice car to own if you enjoy home mechanics, because it's so accessible. Lift the bonnet, and everything is available. Everything you can follow in the workshop manuals. The only slightly tricky thing is probably tuning the SU twin carburetors. That needs a bit of practice and a bit of skill, but you get it in the end. I did almost all my own general maintenance for my 42 years of ownership. In those days, in fact, you still do for this car, you have to change the engine oil probably every 6,000 miles. So when I was doing a really high mileage, it was an awful lot of oil changes. Top up the gearbox, top up the back axle, there's a few grease points. But again, if you enjoy messing around with cars, that's absolutely no problem. In fact, quite enjoyable. I've just found tinkering with the car so relaxing. And often I enjoy just having the bonnet up and doing jobs on it, as enjoyable as actually driving it. And I was probably a frustrated engineer. The big stuff I put in the garages, but that was quite rare. About 2007, 2008, the bodywork was getting quite dull, and I went for a full back to bare metal strip down and respray. To be honest, I was never quite sure whether that was the right thing to do, and whether the old slightly dull paintwork is just was genuine the patina of age. In fact, I'm still not sure even now whether it was the correct thing to do. Anyway, I did it, and I found out today the paint is probably a few shades lighter than the original.
Oh, really?
Yeah, which is a pity, but there we are. But it's very, very, very marginal.
Yeah. But you notice these things when you've got used to the car for so long.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. Well, now I haven't driven it really for the last 3 years, but now after 10 minutes, I'm absolutely at home in it. It's an easy car to drive. The gearbox is very heavy by modern manual gearbox standards. Reverse can be, or some people find reverse a bit of a pig, but you get the right technique. Gear lever over, get your shoulder on top of the gear lever, push straight down, hard to your left, hard away, and you're okay. Just takes a bit of practice. The hood can be a bit fiddly, but again, with practice you get the hang of it. I've had the hood replaced a few times over my 40 plus years, because they tend to last about 7-8 years. Then the transparent, the back window always gets a bit misty, hard to see through. You can get just the replacement window panels, but the hoods get a bit tired as well. So I've had the seats restuffed over the years.
Yes, I noticed they were very comfortable.
Yes.
Very, surprisingly so.
In the 90s, I think the waterways began to fur up a bit, and the radiators getting a bit choked up, and trying to flush it didn't seem to make any difference. So I went in for a full width radiator, and I took off the old fan belt sort of manual radiator fan and fitted an electric Kenlo fan, which worked very well. They're all the major changes. It's got its little kind of fiddly things. The door handles are slightly sort of fragile,
Yeah.
and the linkages, the connectors are just plastic or polystyrene, and they tend to wear, and they can just the connecting rods can pop out, which is a bit of a nuisance. Once you get to them, they're easy to fix. It's just a real faff of a job to get the door handle off, get the door card off to get to them.
Yeah, Steve's been having trouble with that recently. I think the linkage has probably gone again. So.
Yeah, I know. When you get to it, it's you just pop them back in. I used to put some duct tape around them to keep them into the plastic linkage.
So solves everything, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if in doubt, use duct tape. Yes.
Do you miss it?
Yes,
Yeah.
because in my 30s and 40s, I had, pretty, like most youngish people, a stressful job, and I just found tinkering with the car so relaxing. And often I enjoy just having the bonnet up and doing jobs on it, as enjoyable as actually driving it. And I was probably a frustrated engineer in London. I was born in Somerset. I lived here till I was 12 years old, then we moved to London. I went to one of the then embryonic comprehensive schools, but it had a very strong engineering bias. I was taught in my school days to use lathes and drilling machines, and I could make a horseshoe in the forge and all this sort of stuff. In fact, my very first job was an apprentice engineer, but I soon left it. I could see no future in it. But I've always had this sort of real interest in engineering and practical things, and the Spitfire was a great outlet for that, because as I said, the accessibility of the car and its simplicity as well. You could do almost any job yourself. Change the starter motor, tune the carbs up, adjust the car, adjust the tappets. All these things were so easy to do, and with the workshop manual, they were easy to follow. And as I said, I enjoyed immensely doing it. And
it's just something you don't get with modern cars now, isn't it? It's everything just.
Well, I've got a Mitsubishi hybrid, and I'm almost frightened to lift the bonnet up. It's it's got an engine, 2 electric motors, a generator, massive battery, got a computer, God knows what, and
but it's reliable.
It's very reliable.
Yeah.
But to be fair, the Spitfire was always reliable as long as you maintained it, particularly the electrics. As long as you paid particular attention to the points, changed them regularly, kept them well adjusted, because in older cars, the fuel injection cars, it was always the electrics which were the downfall, and when it was bonnets up by the roadside, it was invariably the electrics at fault. So to future owners, I would give that advice: always pay particular attention to keeping the points and the distributor in good condition. Check the timing occasionally with a timing light. It's easy to do. The strobe flashes at 8 degrees before top dead centre. That's the correct point. And you adjust it by slackening the pinch bolt under the distributor and just turning either left or right and watching the strobe light. Dead easy. And it pays dividends. If the timing's spot on, the car just runs so much better.
Yeah.
At the moment, it's running really well.
I was going to ask you that. How is it running compared to when you handed it over to?
Well, I came down with what happens here? I'm not quite sure. We give way. We give away.
Audis have priority.
Of course, yeah. Oh gosh, we've got someone behind us with a rather fast car, and I'll refrain from speeding up. It's not my car anymore. Yes. I came down last year with a friend of mine, and Steve had a few problems with it, and we retimed it. That solved it.
Yes.
Well, I changed the points, the usual things. Changed the points, condenser. I bought my strobe light. Reset the timing.
You can go first exit on this one.
First exit.
Head back.
Yeah.
I'm on 303.
and it was instantly miles better. Busy here, isn't it?
Yeah.
Right, okay, let's go now.
Yeah, brilliant.
So I just showed you
Really good.
it's the third gear overdrive, so you got a few revs on, hit the button, straight away you're, yeah,
Yeah. Real noticeable.
yeah. That screw's loose there. I have to tell Steve he's
Yes,
that
we
needs
heard
tu-
that
yeah,
a few
yeah,
times, a little jangly.
yeah,
So it is just a screw that's
yeah. That just needs a open-ended spanner on it, and yeah, it's going really well. Plenty of torque, plenty of power.
yeah, just hang about. That's for sure.
Speed camera. I know a guy who works for the firm which does all the accounting for speed cameras in southern England,
Yes.
and he
Use the
says
contact.
if they're yellow, they're live. If they're just
okay.
grey, forget it, they're not.
Yes.
Yeah,
There's one just outside Chard,
right.
which hasn't worked for years, and that's great.
Yeah,
Revel sort of slows down for it.
yeah. Watch out, there's
General views.
any speed cameras around here. I mustn't
I
get.
don't think there are,
I
no.
mustn't get Steve a ticket. Won't be too pleased. Actually, I love this car. Actually, I'm starting. What's this a good idea? I'm really missing it now.
Yes,
No, I
yes.
gotta forget it. See a bit annoying that screw. That must have that timed up. Yeah. Goes well.
I don't take it up to that sort of revs at the moment, but I know it can do it. So
Well, I don't do it all the time, but
Yeah,
occasionally
yeah,
it helps just to blast a bit of carbon out of the exhaust system, and
tuning, yeah. Manual tuning.
gets the plugs warmed up, and the plugs burnt off a bit of excess carbon. It's a nice little shot, isn't it? There's hills and the tree and the road. Nice. Oops, is that a speed camera? No, it's not.
Just,
no, it's a.
there is. I think there is one in
Yeah,
Manchester.
yeah, there is. Yeah, I'll
40, so.
drop the speed down. really enjoyed that. That was great.
I'm sure it'll allow you to take it out anytime when you're back down. Thank you ever so much for watching this second part of the Triumph Spitfire feature. If you like what you've seen so far, please consider subscribing to the channel, it means a lot. In the third and final part, we'll be looking at some of the extensive maintenance and history of this vehicle, and I'll be summing up just what it means, these sort of classic cars, these British convertible sports cars, just what they mean to petrol heads like us. So I'll see you soon.